Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Omni Athlete. You're here because, like us, you believe that sport is a vehicle for elevating global consciousness. But you know that elevating consciousness through sport only matters if it actually helps you to compete at your highest level. We created this show to empower your performance with the wisdom and techniques of the world's highest achieving mind, body, and spirit competitors. Okay, so today's guest is a coach to elite athletes during one of the most difficult transitions any human being can go through, retirement. While he started this journey as a life coach 4 years ago, his use of distance Reiki and the positive impact it had on a client who just happened to be an elite swimmer preparing for the Olympics brought to the surface what would become one of his true callings: to help transitioning athletes answer questions like, who am I without my sport? And will I still be loved if I'm not a professional athlete anymore? And so many more. Facilitating the processing of these questions and this radical reset for elite athletes is what he has dedicated his life to ever since. It's my pleasure to introduce to Omni Athlete, the coach and transition mentor to elite athletes across all sports, Stewart McConnell. Welcome to the show, Stuart.
Thanks so much for having me.
So there's so many places that I think we could start, but the one that comes to mind, transitioning for athletes is beginning to emerge as a space where more and more attention is being put. It's still tiny, right? As I'm sure you know, like there's still not nearly enough, but can you walk some of us through like what you think is contributing to more of the focus being put towards what happens as a professional athlete when I'm done playing?
Mental health is a big part of it. Suicide. There's a lot of athletes that are actually committing suicide, and just the pervasiveness of media and social media. So people being able to speak out without having to go through like bigger news channels. So it really gets the word out in a very different way. And I think people are being a little bit more bold and wanting to bring forth the things that they're actually dealing with than we used to before, especially athletes, right? You know, that you get this idea like they're the big, strong people who can handle everything, and we never know what's actually going on beneath the surface. Because at the end of the day, they're just people like us. It doesn't matter whether you're an athlete or you're a celebrity or you're the guy picking up the garbage, right? We're all the same.
What do you think contributes so much? This is a little bit of a loaded question, but I think it's a great place for us to kind of jump from that point. So we don't look at professional athletes the same as everybody else, right? I mean, it's just real. Even college athletes, right? Like I remember growing up as a kid, idolizing, the players at CU because it's all I was, shown and talked about as a kid. I grew up wanting to play football for CU so bad, and being on the field with these guys as a freshman, like I idolize these people who are really just 3 years older than I am and are no different as human beings. Why does that happen?
Yeah. Why does that happen? That is a big question. So we really want more for ourselves. We want to believe in something greater. We want distraction is actually a big part of it. It's something that I actually talk to people a lot. I have the opportunity to also work with high school students, and hearing them talk about the game last night and what this person did and what that person did, and the entire focus of their, hour-long time with me is all about, the game from last night and everything. I was like, yeah, but did you know that this also happened last night? And there's this, and they're so caught up in the perceived lives of these other people, it just makes for such a good distraction. It's like social media, right? Exactly. It's the same sort of thing where you just get distracted into what somebody else is doing instead of focusing on what's really important, which is what's actually going on in your life. And in a lot of cases, that can suck for a lot of people, right? They're not happy with the way they look, the way they feel, where their job is, what's happening in their relationships. So, check out, and you get so focused on something else somewhere.
So it's like sport is this beautiful vehicle and medium, right? Where as human beings, we watch sports, right? We're drawn to sports for so many beautiful, very tribal, very primal pieces of our experience. But at the same time, I think what you're pointing to, and it feels intuitive, right, is that it also allows us to look externally when we're watching and not competing versus to have those internal moments.
Yeah, yeah, and there should be a balance between them. There's I'll never forget. I was actually walking through the airport in Miami on a transfer, and it was Monday night, and they had football on the big screen TVs in the airport, and there were probably 40 to 50 people glued to each of these TVs, and there was nothing else that actually mattered. It was actually kind of scary the way that they were so fixated on this TV. And it would be really different if they were talking to each other and having casual conversation like, oh, did you see that or this or that or whatever, where they were actually coming together as fans to watch the game, as opposed to being mesmerized and tuned out. So I think that's a big part of it. And the glorification of the athlete like a gladiator, as opposed to just appreciating what it is that they're actually doing in the sport. Yeah. You hear conversations about, oh my God, this guy, he played so badly last night and it was terrible and he really sucks and I don't know why they even picked him. Like, do you really understand what it took to get to the pros? Like, we're talking like the 1% that are actually making it, and you have the nerve to sit there on your couch and say how much this guy sucks.
So what comes to mind, right, is like, what's happening to the athlete on the other side of it, right? So there's this, and this is where I think we'll spend a lot of time in our conversation, but what happens to the identity of the athlete when that is the culture that surrounds them?
It's really, really tough on these guys, men and women, not just guys. But there's so much they have to live up to, and they also have a belief that when I make it here, then it's going to be amazing, and it's going to be this, and it's going to be that, and they're pinning their happiness on making it to this particular level, and then they get there, and they're still unhappy. And there's all this stuff that they now have to live up to because now they're, on the media all the time and people are following them all over social media and they don't even have privacy. I was speaking to a professional football player who retired maybe about 15 years ago. And he was saying, the worst thing to happen for them is social media now because they don't have the space to just be people. They can't make the same mistakes that everybody else would make in their growing as a person because it's all public. So the amount of pressure to continue to be this perfect person that just, can't really exist, it just adds so much more pressure.
And I would wonder, this isn't just professional athletes we're talking about, right? I mean, this is I would imagine to a certain extent, elite athlete, that term brings to mind, okay, professionals, Olympians, college, right at the highest levels of collegiate competition. Yeah. But I would imagine too, even on a smaller scale, this trickles down to even very competitive high school athletes, right? When there's a moment or a period of time where their identity is shaped by those different factors that you just shared. I mean, when sport ends for them, it leaves a big hole, right?
Yeah. It's basically anybody who's in a position of leadership.
Yeah.
Because these athletes are seen as leaders. They are shaping the minds of people depending on what they say, right? Anything that they say, look at all the stuff that happened in football last year with, the national anthem and everything else, right? Like making a stand, and what that actually did. It was one person who was speaking his mind, and it caused this entire eruption across the entire country.
So let's dive into that for a moment, because the idea of the role that athletes have, sometimes the power that I think a lot of us don't know that we have at the time to shape conversations.
Mm-hmm. That is the piece that I think is like a linchpin. There's so much that's happening in society right now. There's so much change and everything that's going on. And these athletes who have the ear of millions and millions of people, I think they're really quite a linchpin in change, like good, big change that can happen on a mass scale that nobody else can really have, right? Like as individuals, because they're already there. They already have the media infrastructure already set up through all the social media and everything else, all the people following them. And, it's important that they're careful on what they say, because it is important, but also using that platform. And I think we're starting to see more and more people using that platform to help others. I think it's really important.
Where do you start with an athlete that becomes a client with you? So somebody who has freshly retired from their sport or decided to transition their life, what are some of the landmines, for lack of a better word, that you want to help them prepare for?
There's a handful. The big one is there's essentially three big ones: loss of purpose, loss of identity, and loss of structure. And they all kind of tie in together. So we can take loss of structure, because that's an easy one to kind of tackle, right? So these elite athletes, whether you're an Olympian, whether you're a pro athlete, whatever it is, everything is set up for you so rigidly. You wake up at this time, you're in the gym for these amount of hours, you go home, you eat, everything is laid up so rigidly. And then all of a sudden the structure is gone. And you're left up to your own devices to figure things out. And that in and of itself is actually a huge, huge challenge for people, because they don't even know where to start. Like when we wake up in the morning, when the average person wakes up in the morning, we just kind of get up and go, and we do whatever there is for us to do. We don't sit and lay out our day. And by even just giving them that idea, like, okay, when you wake up in the morning, lay out your day. What do you want your day to look like? So then you have something to follow. And even, anybody doing that, it makes your day so much easier, because you have the structure in place. You don't have to think about it or whatever. It makes a huge difference in terms of feeling like you have a direction, feeling like you have a bit of a purpose, right? So the structure is a big part, because the first thing is, I want to go and I want to relax. I don't want to think about anything. I don't want a structure right now. I just want to sit on the couch, eat a bag of cookies, and watch Netflix. Right? Because I haven't been able to do that ever.
Right.
So doing that for a little while is fine, but you get into a bit of a rabbit hole of just doing it, day after day, week after week, month after month, and then you actually can't pull yourself out of that hole. So working with, like, okay, so what is enough time? And then, like, okay, you've had your time, let's go. We got to do something now, because you can't keep doing that. It's good because it's a little bit of self-indulgence. At that point, it's self-care to just enjoy to enjoy that part of life that you've never had to before, to a point, and then you got to move on. And if you want to go back to it, you can go back to it, but you just don't stay there too long.
What about the idea of self-care in general? In your experience, how is that processed by athletes making that transition? Because what comes to mind for me is that so many so many of us don't prioritize self-care as it is, right? Let alone people and human beings that have just been in a point in their life where the very fundamental, performance they have to make is to push themselves at this like extreme level constantly. Self-care is often very low on that priority list. What have you seen to be that experience? Both, what is their relationship to self-care when they're playing, and then when they transition out, what does self-care mean to them?
Well, self-care is hugely important to the whole process, because it's essentially self-love. And they're pushing themselves so hard to just be better and be better and be better and be better. Like you said, they're not even paying attention to themselves as much. The only self-care that they're giving is enough to get back in the game, right? So if they, you go for a massage, you go for physio or whatever, but it's all to get back into the game. And then the idea of self-care afterwards still isn't really there, because they're really lost. The bigger issue is the loss of purpose. The loss of purpose and identity are the two other really big ones that are there that have to be tackled. And out of that, then you start to get into self-care. So you can't tackle that one too soon, because the idea, like, even if you're a college athlete in the United States, everybody since you've been in high school at the very least has said, how amazing you are and how great you are and this and that and everything. And you go off to university and college and you're a god, right? You're getting everything that you want and everything else. It's really amazing. And then, God forbid your career ends there. You have believed yourself to be an athlete the entire time. And that's on the conservative end, 10 years. Then you go off and you play in the pros, 10, 14, 15, 20 years if you're lucky, through your whole career from, high school all the way up. You've believed yourself to be this. I am an athlete. And now that's gone. I was speaking to a pro boxer, a former pro boxer. He was an 8-time Canadian national champion. And he said it was like when he decided to retire, it was like a door was shut. Going out and being known at the nightclubs and everything else went away very quickly. Yeah. He didn't get invited to all the things he used to get invited to and everything else. And it's like, oh my God, what's going on? I'm not important anymore. Who am I? If I'm not this and this celebrity sort of person, who am I? And, at the end of the day, being you were never an athlete. An athlete was a job that you did. A plumber wouldn't really define himself as a plumber. He might say, I'm a plumber, but he doesn't believe I am a plumber. He knows it's the job that he does.
Stuart, have you read the book Finite Games and Infinite Games?
No, I haven't.
One that I think you would love. And the reason, and the reason I bring it up is what you just shared right there. It's this notion of scripts, right? What are the scripts that we unknowingly take on in life, right? That aren't just scripts, right? They're just rules that we're, so if as an athlete, right, I take on the script of this is what an athlete is supposed to do. If I'm going to be a college athlete, this is what I'm supposed to do. And yet we very rarely, if ever, understand it's just a script. How do you help someone process that? What is your process like for helping somebody go, okay, this is just a script. You are more than this. Let's figure out who you really are.
Well, that's actually where we start with, like, let's look at who you really are. What do you do in your off time? What do you love to do? And even though you don't necessarily have a lot of off time, there are things that you like to do, some hobbies that you like to do, whatever it is. Let's start there. And then let's find some more things that you like to do. And then we can expand on it from there. Like, these are the things that are more who you are than just the thing that you were doing. We're still talking of like we're summing you up as these things that you like to do, but it's a step, right? And the nice thing about working with athletes in what it is that they're going through is it's essentially like an existential crisis,
right?
Like, who am I in the bigger scope of things? So not just looking at, okay, well, let's get you put back together so that you can go and get, a 9-to-5 job and be okay in your life. It's like, let's get you to a point where you're understanding who you are in this bigger picture that we actually live in. So it's taking it many steps down. And it's a year-long process that we work through. It's not, a lot of people will, coaching programs and stuff like that, it's 12 weeks or whatever. It's like, no, this is something that is much bigger, that you actually have to go and live out and, skin your knee and everything else and come back. And then we can look at, we can take things apart again and look at wherever we need to dive into next, to reshape who you are over the course of that year.
So this notion of just putting the pieces back together for a reason, right? What comes screaming through my mind is you're pointing to this idea that a lot of times we do things because we want to be something, right? We want to do something. So
Yeah.
I'm going through this existential crisis. I need to get a job. I need to start, the next phase of my life. I need to start my next career. I want to be an entrepreneur, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
We choose to put our pieces back together for a reason.
Yeah.
And what it sounded like you were saying right there is, well, that's one choice, but we could make a different choice. And it would be, let's just figure out what the pieces are and how they all fit together without having a pure reason for it.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason why we have all these goals and everything else is there's essentially three things that we believe that those goals are going to give us: love, joy, and fulfillment.
Hmm.
And, I got to go out there and get a job because I need money, because I need the money to get joy or fulfill, that's what this is going to bring in. And in a lot of cases, is the money important? Like to go get a job? Yeah, let's go get a stopgap job so that you can feel comfortable enough to have your bills paid. As we sit down and figure out, have you see who you really are and how amazing and great you truly are and the contribution you can be to the planet and how to best leverage you for all of that to come out and get paid in some way.
Yeah.
Right? So that's actually the way that I look at it.
So what role does sport play when we're competing, right? And let's make this question not just about professional athletes, but let's say just sport in general. Love, joy, and fulfillment, right? What role does sport play in helping us to realize the needs we have within those three desires?
Flow state. That's really what comes to mind. It's flow state is such an amazing place. And I've also started doing work with young up and coming athletes, and even people who are fairly high level athletes who don't have a process to get into flow state. It's accidental. And it's like, no, because that is the gold right there. Being in that flow state space to me is the most important thing. And sport is a great access to it. And it's such a great thing because all flow state is being hyper present in this moment. And when you're there, it shifts your context for everything. And especially if you can take it from being in sport to just being in your everyday life, at whatever time you want it, it's if you can start to pull it in on tap, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And it's essentially what you get through meditation too, when you get good at meditation. Yeah.
So with the athletes that you work with that are currently playing, what are some of the areas that you want to focus, or maybe a better way to say this is, what are some of the areas that you want them to help create focus around in their life that is both going to contribute to better performance and that you think will help set them up for a smooth transition when they're done?
So in terms of better performance, the big thing that I actually look at, and it's really actually pretty straightforward, is your environments. So cleaning up your environments is the biggest thing that you can do. So Carolyn Miss, I don't know if you've heard of Carolyn Miss.
No.
So she's a medical intuitive, and she has a really interesting way of looking at it, where she calls it your $100, call it $100 allowance of energy every day. So imagine you have this $100 in energy as soon as you wake up. Right. Now you wake up and you're like, well, you have all this old baggage that you continually carry around. Well, that's like $10 gone. Then you start thinking about all the things you need to do today and the things you don't want to do today. That's another $10, $15 gone. By the time you get in the shower, you're thinking, oh, I got to deal with this jerk from yesterday, and I can't believe that happened. There's another $20, $30 gone. By the time you hit lunch, you're out of $100. Where are you going for the rest of the day to get you through the day? Well, you're borrowing from the bank. The bank is your body. Right? So based off of that idea, like, well, how can I get the athletes to use less of their allowance. So let's actually look at your environments. So we break it up into your outermost environment, which is how you get to work, the way you go to work and everything, your work environment, what that is actually like. And what can you do there to actually clean that up and remove some of the heaviness, the weight that is around that. Then we start looking at an inner environment, a more inner environment. So the neighborhood you live in. What's in the neighborhood you live in like? What are all those things? What is your house like? Are these, when you look around your house, does it bring you joy? All the things in your house? Or do you go, oh God, there's this other thing and it's over here and I really should get rid of this? All this kind of stuff. Everything in your house should bring you joy, right? Because then it's pulling for the best of you to actually come on. It's actually feeding into your allowance. So instead of it taking, it's actually giving you back, right? It's actually returning. It's like an investment that you're making. Then we start working at like the inner environments and stuff like that. We even look at, the music, movies, video games you're playing, all these things, they have an impact, especially music. Music has a huge, huge impact. So not that you don't have to listen to a type of music anymore, but what are you predominantly surrounding yourself with? Is it something that's pulling you forward or holding you back? It's one of the two. And that's what I actually look at with performance first and foremost. Because when you can clean that up, the amount of energy that you have to give to your sport is massive. The speed that you can get back in the game, the speed of repair, it goes up drastically because you just have more energy to give.
What's so interesting, Stuart, is that I feel like what so many coaches and athletes, what we fail to recognize a lot of times, and I'll say we, because I know it's something that constantly I'm realizing my awareness is becoming more and more acute on it because I see opportunities for growth here where everything is energy, right? And as athletes and coaches, we may take for granted that, okay, I'm in the gym for a workout, the music's playing, that's energy, right? What my teammates are doing around me, that's energy. The language that I'm using is energy. The way... Yeah. So can you speak to that a little bit around what are some of the forms of energetic baggage, so to speak, in that performance environment that you see typically comes up that ends up weighing performance down or weighing athletes down in those moments?
A big one is how best to put it? So it's the continual self-analysis.
Okay.
So there was a swimmer that I was working with. So her event was the 50 meter. So really quick, 24, 25 seconds kind of thing. And she would analyze every single stroke. In that short period of time, she would analyze every single stroke. Wow. And the big punch in the nose for her was when I said, so you're focusing on what you just did, not what you're going to do, not the next stroke. So your mind is like a fraction of a second behind. And she was kind of like, oh my God. So I actually worked with her we went through the whole baggage and everything else. And then the next part is we work on, I call it flow state 5. Yeah. So just like a countdown list of things to do to bring you to the point like for her, right before the gun goes, to be in that headspace so that she would not analyze every single stroke. She would just be with herself in the water and just be like, just sort of outside of herself, just watching what's going on. And the amount that it freed her up was incredible.
What do you see when you work with an athlete, when you walk up to somebody who's competing, right? Mm-hmm. What are some of the pieces of body language, of environmental cues that'll tell you, oh, there's some baggage hanging here? What can we, is there, and the reason this question comes to mind for me is there is so much that we just take for granted around performance, right? There are questions we don't ask sometimes about how I'm standing in between drills, how I'm, what the first, like you just pointed out, the thoughts that are going through my head as I'm performing. Are there cues that tell you as a coach, as a mentor, as a facilitator there, are there cues that you pick up on and go, okay, I see there's something hanging on to you here. What is this? How do we grab it and shape it and let it go?
A lot of that happens intuitively.
Yeah.
It's like I just know, and then I can look at them and go, yeah, like there's this little thing here. There's this little hesitation. There's just something that's right there. And it's usually like I can feel it first. Like I just know there's something, and then I can kind of pick out a physical cue, because like you said, it always shows itself physically.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll actually work with it sort of the other way around. So let's actually work on your body language in order to help change what's going on with you mentally.
Mm-hmm. How can we better train our intuition? So for you, where that, and this, again, it's a giant question, but what has helped you train that intuition and that ability to say, I feel this. Let's talk about this, or let's point to this, or let's surface this.
Trust. Trusting that odd thought that comes into your head isn't a random odd thought, that it's actually pointing to something. So for me, never really thought about that at all. Not intuitive. I was a not intuitive person. I was not. That was not me, kind of thing, right? And I'd been life coaching for a few years, and I thought it was time to do Reiki, something my mom had done for years and everything else. And just had this feeling like, let's do it. So long story short, I started doing it for people, and things would pop into my head. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to actually tell them this when the session was over. Let's see how it goes. And there were friends, when you started off, I was just doing it with friends. So I felt a little bit more comfortable. Still really awkward to say these odd, random things. And it was 100% accurate. And it started to make me go, okay, so let's start trusting this and see where it goes.
Yeah.
So it's essentially, it's there for everybody. We just don't trust it because it's non-physical. There isn't something that you can physically point to and go, this is connected to that, which is connected to this point and everything else. We can't draw those parallels because they're just completely random. And sorry to go on with that just a little bit. We so many of our thoughts actually belong to other people, and we take them on as our own. And that was really big to get. So when you all of a sudden you're feeling your mood shift for no apparent reason, chances are it actually belongs to somebody else. And if you ask yourself that question, you'll get an answer like, yeah, this is mine, or no, this isn't mine. And if it's a no, this isn't mine, it goes away like this. It's really amazing how quickly that goes away.
How often does that show up in locker rooms?
It's a collective consciousness. That's all that's it. And it is hugely, hugely important on teams to have a collective consciousness, everybody being on the same page. You see that countless times over the years with teams that have just dominated for so long and everything else, and the great coaches and everything else. They've been able to create a collective consciousness that everybody has bought into. So it is really important when it's going in the right direction. And you can also have some people to poison the collective consciousness and have it actually get dismantled.
And is that poisoning a conscious act at times, or is it an unconscious baggage that's coming with them?
Unconscious baggage that's coming with them. Everybody's on the team because they want to win. But a lot of people they say they want to win, but underneath it all, subconsciously, they don't. there's a self-destructive quality that's actually underneath it all.
So I'm for those of you guys that are not watching the video, I'm pausing because 3 questions came into my head at the same time, and I'm trying to so one of the ideas that we're talking more and more about within the context of social entrepreneurship, right, is that maybe more so than most, social entrepreneurs are typically filling a hole that that they feel internally, right? And a lot of times there's an awareness to this. There's an awareness to, I want to bring this to the world because I feel as though I don't have it, or that I didn't have it, and it would help people to bring this forward. As you were sharing that, Stuart, what came to mind for me is there are probably a lot of athletes that go into sport very quickly develop a feedback loop that fills a hole that they don't even recognize that they're trying to fill. Have you experienced that in your clients that you've worked with and conversations you've had? And can you share any of the common themes that have come up around what that hole might be that draws someone into sport, maybe for the wrong reasons?
Yeah, a lot of, the wrong reasons are doing it for other people.
Yeah.
Doing it for family, doing it for the fulfillment of, your parents living vicariously through you. And that can be really self-destructive because you're really doing it for the wrong reasons. Everybody has their own deep reasons on why, and it really is just so varied. I was dealing with somebody who was a soccer player in Europe, and he was playing for the B team, and he was just right on the cusp of breaking through and everything else. Kept getting injured over and over and over again, and we talked about what's going on and everything else. And I said, well, if this is the case, you can easily come and play for in the States,
sure,
in Canada, right? The MLS,
right?
And he said, no, I don't want to play there. The level of the game just isn't the same, and I only want to play in Europe. And if I can't play there, I'm not going to play. And I said, well, that's why you're getting injured, right? You're not actually playing for the love of the game. You're playing for something else. And digging in there to find it all the time isn't actually what we do all the time. So I've learned in the last little while that sometimes we don't actually need to get to the bottom to release what's there.
Yeah.
We just need to find that there is a problem and start working on whatever it is that's actually there on top. And then it sort of ends up unwinding both ways. It's really amazing how it works.
Interesting. That's energizing, and there is both. I would imagine there's a lot of warmth sent your way from athletes and clients in that moment, right? Because a lot of times we're not ready to process the whole, right? To open up the whole and say, this is it. This is what I'm dealing with as we go through these moments. Yeah.
And actually, the way that we end up dealing with it is we find we find a little trigger that's there. So there's some emotion that kind of comes up, and I used to do it where we dug back through, and it would take several sessions to get back to the root and everything else and stuff. But now what I do, we find that emotion, and then we find where it's sitting in the body. That emotion is anchored somewhere in the body, and then we just start looking at that area and digging into all the emotions and all the feelings that are actually just in that area of the body. And then we do a releasing exercise. So, and we do it in the room, and then we also will do it, they have to do it a few times over, and there's usually an affirmation that will go with it. And it releases, the releasing that happens in that is massive. It's unbelievable, and it's so much faster. Like instead of taking 3 sessions or 4 sessions, we get to the heart of it in an hour.
Do you find that most athletes, most coaches, performers in general, don't recognize how much of their body is storing emotion?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Most people have
Yeah.
no idea, but it's amazing. Everything. I'm a firm believer that everything that is wrong in your body, every pain, everything that is there, it's ended up in that spot for a particular reason. Why is it that you're playing the same sport as let's say you're running and you're running the same as somebody else, and their ankle goes on them, their right ankle goes on them, and your left ankle goes on you. Like, why the difference? And when you start looking back into ancient Chinese medicine, and they have like incredible books based on all these different things, and this is what's stored here, this is what's stored there. I started learning about it through Louise Hay. You Can Heal Your Life. Her book, You Can Heal Your Life, was mind-blowing in terms of when you start looking through the charts and you think, okay, well, I have 5 things wrong with me. They can't all deal with the same thing. And they all actually deal with the same thing. It was actually kind of scary at first, but the more that I started working with it, the more I could see the truth in it, because it was just, yeah. I mean, I could go on about that one forever, because I just find it so fascinating.
Wow. Yeah. That interconnectedness for so many of us who would consider ourselves very connected to our body it feels like, and this feels like a point that you're pointing to, no pun intended, we oftentimes are connected on a very surface level, not truly to the level that our body can speak to us, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We're really unaware of all of these other things that are going on in the background, and having somebody who can actually help navigate that for you, where you don't have to go and do all the research and dig down all the rabbit holes and do all of this learning and how to connect and everything else. Having a few people, like a team of people who can actually help pull all those pieces together for you is enormous. I actually know somebody, he's a chiropractor.
Yeah.
And he was unsatisfied with the idea that people just kept coming back. It's like he would fix them, but then they would come back again. Right. And so he started learning a few different techniques. He learned active release technique or therapy or whatever it is, and Graston and all these different kinds of things, and they would still come back. So then he found something called German New Medicine. And when I started looking into it, it's essentially, to me, sounded a lot like ancient Chinese medicine, just with a slightly different twist. And now what he does is he will look at where they're having a problem in the body, and then go, okay, so what's actually going on emotionally with blah, 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 because he knows that this type of emotion gets stored here. And he's had more success with people than he did just doing chiropractic or any of the other manipulations.
Wow.
Yeah.
The language that the body speaks to us with, right, at times is incredible and hard to hear at times, or we are not trained to listen to maybe as well as we should be at times.
Yeah, I'd say we're not trained to listen to it as best as we can, and unfortunately, when we don't listen to the little tap on the shoulder, sometimes we get hit with the big hammer.
Has to get our attention some way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Stuart, this has been incredible and energizing. So before I ask my final question here, where can these guys go to connect with you online?
StewartMcConnell.net. So StewartMcConnell.net.
Awesome. Okay. So our final question. This show is called Omni Athlete, and the idea behind it is to understand what it takes to be the ultimate mind, body, and spirit competitor. So our final question is, what does it mean to you to be an Omni Athlete?
It means to live a life, so not just a life of sport, from love, joy, and fulfillment every day. That is the most important thing. And that's what it means to me to be an Omni Athlete.
Wow. Thank you, Stuart, for being on the show. This has been just energizing, man. Oh my gosh. Guys, go check out Stuart's work, dive into his world. transitioning as an athlete is not something that is reserved to just professional athletes and gold medalists, right? We, as athletes, as coaches even, we go through these major shifts in life where sport plays such a giant role in how we wrap ourselves, how we package ourselves, how we view ourselves. And what you're going to learn and understand as you dive into Stuart's world is that there needs to be a process for going through that transition, because if we don't, we just we sleepwalk through life, and we unconsciously carry with us this baggage and these holes that we could fill, that we have the power to fill and connect to, and just have a deeper and richer experience of life. And I cannot recommend highly enough, go into his ecosystem. The podcast he has, the conversations he has, listen to these athletes, these figures that we all know, right? There's a part of them in all of us. And if we can grab onto that notion that transitioning and learning how to transition isn't reserved for the best of the best, but rather it's just a process we all can derive power from. Oh my gosh, guys, you're going to be better performers, better people. It's going to feel amazing. And it will just truly change who you are and how you perform. So go check out Stuart's website, dive into his world, subscribe to his podcast, and get into his ecosystem. And until next time, guys, thank you for listening to this episode of Omni Athlete.